Thank you, Megan, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this demo showing you Tricentis Tosca Data Integrity and how it's being used in the healthcare industry. Tosca Data Integrity is an end-to-end data warehouse testing tool. We set up tests along your warehouse from when you first have access to the data to when you do different moves and transformations. As you can see on the right-hand side, we set up what we call pre-screening and vital checks, doing tests like metadata, formatting, completeness, and so on, at different stages as early as possible so we can identify issues when they occur. Once we do these types of tests, we can then focus on the data itself and do reconciliation, transformation, and profiling or monitoring. We can also test on the reporting layer for BI. Whatever your data source is, whether it's a file or a database, and wherever it's hosted, we have connectors that will allow us to connect to your different data warehouses, wherever they may be, and set up these different types of tests. For today, we're going to focus on a Medicare example. If we look at the CMS star ratings, these can impact facilities' financial value. Moving from 3 to 4 stars can increase your revenue by 13 to 17%, just looking at new enrollments and bonuses. This can also affect you negatively with different penalties. There are also a number of other ways we use the star rating, where it comes to competitiveness or measuring things like standards within the facilities. Ratings can also impact the way you're perceived locally and nationally, and they can help consumers decide where to get healthcare. These are just some examples. These star ratings are assigned based on data, so it's very important that this data is accurate. Medicare makes this data available publicly, so for today's example, we have downloaded all the Medicare datasets, which are a number of flat files in CSV format. And throughout the warehouse, we've set up an environment and done certain checks. We can do metadata and formatting checks on the flat files, and as it gets moved and transformed throughout the warehouse, we can do other types of testing. For today, I've set up a sample environment using these CSV files, uploading it to Snowflake, to SQL Server, and creating some Power BI reports, so we can get a good idea of this scenario and how it works in healthcare. Now we're looking at my desktop, and you can see my sample environment I've set up with the real data from Medicare. Here's all the different types of testing we can do with Tosca DI throughout your warehouse at different stages. And first, let's have a look at our data. Here's all the flat files in CSV format that I've downloaded from Medicare. I uploaded these into SQL Server in a few tables in my database. Uploaded them also to Snowflake over here. You can see there's a couple of tables there. And I've also created some reports. And Tosca DI can automate across all these technologies and platforms wherever they may be hosted. So if I open up Tosca, you can see here's the UI of the tool, and on the left-hand side we have our navigation. Before we jump into the data warehouse testing, let's look at model-based automation and understand how that works. We automate across all technologies using this model-based approach. Here are some examples. And we have predefined models for data integrity testing. Models are created using a scanner, if they're custom or in-house developed applications, whether they're UI or API, and they can all be assembled in a test. We do that by coming here to the blue section. I can simply create a test and drag and drop the models as I create them. If I start off with some UI models, you can see there's a web-based application here. There could be API models as well, but I simply drag and drop all of these into my test here. And you can see now we have a model, a test case that goes across a web application and API. Database testing can be combined into the same test case by drag and drop. We enter the data over here, select the action mode as to what we want to do with the data, inputs, verifications, buffering, saving data, and they can jump from one technology to another. These test cases can be converted into templates, which can then be data-driven by our test sheets. Now that we have a basic understanding of how Tosca works with our model-based automation, we can look at our data warehouse testing. We've seen the pre-built models already, and now we can look at some predefined templates. Across databases and files, depending on the types of tests we want to do, whether they're metadata checks, formatting, checking referential integrity, whatever it might be, we have predefined templates. If we have a look here, we're doing some database to database testing on field level, and we want to check duplicate values. A template exists here. It's already parameterized, and it's a SQL query. We can customize it, we can delete it, we can create new ones. We have full control over these templates. And these templates are leveraged in Wizards. This allows us to create tests on a large scale when it comes to these sort of pre-screening and vital tests, types of tests that we call them. And we simply need to point to files, point to databases, and test cases are generated by the thousands. To give you a quick preview of that, let's collapse all this. I will go to my sandbox, and here's my data integrity wizard. If I start up my field level test for database to database, I will quickly walk through my wizard, connecting to my SQL server, connecting to my Snowflake environment, matching tables, and selecting the tests, which are those predefined templates we talked about. You can select them per field, but for time's sake, I'm just going to select all of them, hit the next button, automatically create execution lists to hook up to a build tool, automatically create requirements for risk-based testing, and our Tosca DI goes, pulls the modules it needs, pulls the templates that you've created and customized, and generates these tests on a large scale. If we drill down, we can see a datasheet was created to point to my different data sources. This could be files or databases. There's the templates that were used earlier and the actual test that we'll need to run at runtime. The parameterized templates are now converted into tests, pulling the data from the files or databases that we've pointed to, establishing connections in various ways, and these queries will run. And in this example, it's doing a minimum length source count, saving it to memory, and comparing it against the target. If we have a look at my examples I've already created, we've seen how we can use the wizard to create pre-screening and vital checks from files, database, a combination of the two. On database level, on field level, these can all be set up, but let's have a quick look here. There's some on file level. If I open this up just so you can see, we've pointed to a file and are doing a min-length test again, and this is what it looks like, all created and maintained by these templates. As I go through the actual data warehouse, looking at the different tests, once we've done the pre-screening and vital checks and field level tests, we can then move on to the data itself. And if I come over here, I've got some examples set up. And in my example, I've created a very basic one that says we're migrating from a data file to a database. And if I open up my actual test here, there's a predefined model that we use to do row-by-row comparisons from a source to a target. And in this example, my source is a file. You can see I connect to any database using ODBC drivers, Web HDFS, SSH, OLAP. We have native connections to SAP BW. Here you can see I've pointed to a file. It's my local CSV that I mentioned, comma separator. And as I scroll through, you can see I've set up some options like the first row is header. I can trim out double quotes in my header, which have changed as I was uploading it to different data sources. Trim out the dots and the zeros where formatting has changed. And then compare it to my database, which is up in Snowflake. Establish my connection, run my query, apply the similar sort of functions there to columns and cells, add my row keys, and add some reporting function to it as well. We have a number of reporting, as we saw with the execution list and risk-based testing, but we also create HTML reports outside of the tool, which are a lot easier to read when it comes to large volumes of data. These can be created in HTML and CSV formats. You can also add different tolerances to your actual checks that you're doing. So for financial values, if there's a tolerance of ±4, of ±2, you can add that in there. And there's a number of different other options along the way. So that was a file to database comparison. If we have a look here, here's a straight database to database comparison. Very similar, just pointing to a database, running a query, adding some more cell options along the way, and then comparing to another database using the same model and creating some more reports for me there. Here I've also created match data log file as well. Here's an example. If I jump to my SQL query, my SQL database, where we ran a query, and we saw that if we look at the mortality rate in Alaska and added 4 cells together for different hospitals, it came to 23. I checked this on hospital level and state level, and there was a mismatch. Here there's 24 for the same criteria. When we set this up in Tosca DI, this is what it would look like. We would first open up, run my query, and save the data from the actual hospital. And where we need to add all the values together, we can run the same query, but this time, if I expand, you can see we've saved the 4 individual values with the different types of hospitals, using out-of-the-box modules to add them all together with our maths function, and lastly, just comparing the 2 values together. This is all done out of the box, and it really simplifies your actual SQL querying that you're running. Another one we did was loading up a JSON file. This is the FHIR Healthcare Data Exchange Standards that we found publicly available. I downloaded these. There was a JSON file for code system DCOM. You can see over there. We loaded it up. It loads it up into its caching memory. And then you can actually use the caching database over here, join the tables together, because we're loading up a flat file which is semi-structured. In this case it's JSON, it could be XML. It'll create a number of tables. You can join them up together and then compare them to another data source using our standard row-by-row comparison module like I've done over here. So whatever the comparisons you need to do, we have pre-built models. We approach it in different layers to do different types of testing. We can break up the actual test into smaller pieces and then assemble it in an end-to-end flow, as you can see over here. Now that we've seen some reconciliation, we can have a look at our reporting. Our reporting is where I go off to my Power BI report, and just so you can see, this is what it looks like. If I expand my test over here, we're launching my browser. I'm already signed in, but we can automate that as well. We're navigating to the report, applying any filters along the way, and in this case, it's going to actually pull the data straight from the report itself, from the UI. If there's any APIs available, we would always automate this via API because it's a lot more stable and a lot faster, and grab the data from there. And then again, we can run queries against data marts as needed. Save the data coming back from there. And as we did before, compare the 2 values together from the BI report to the actual database or anywhere along the warehouse. Here's a basic example of profiling as well. If I open that up, one thing we saw with the data they provided, there's a lot of hospital surveys being done, then certain ratings are provided. So I've set up a profiling test that will actually go through and check based on a certain criteria to see where it equals 1 or 2 and for a specific value. That was the query I started off with. I can come into Tosca DI, expand this, write my query, parameterize it, and attach a data-driven sheet to it. The common test cases can be set up using the predefined templates or creating your own, but you can always customize your own when it comes to profiling and transformations. Create your own templates out of them, create your own data sources, whether it's within Tosca DI, whether it's in data sheets like Excel spreadsheets. We can hook these up together. And here I'm running profiling for different facilities, checking different ranges, and making sure they match a certain threshold. If they exceed the threshold, you can see I've got an if statement in there. If it's above a specific threshold, I can write all the data to an Excel spreadsheet and then email off a certain set of users and emailing off the reports to them. And once all the tests have been created, we can assemble them in the logical flow throughout your warehouse. So although we set them up in different stages using different modules and templates or manually creating the SQL queries and tests ourselves, we then combine them all in our execution section for our reporting and to be hooked up to a build tool or scheduler to run. So you can see I have different tests that ran for pre-screening, for vital checks, reconciliation, whatever it might be. As I open this up, you can see different levels. And these are the actual log files of the tests. And you can run reports based on this. But again, like we said, when it comes to reconciliation, if we have a look here, all the log files are in the actual log info column here. But you can see as you have millions of records, this could be quite hard to read. So what we also create is these reports outside of the tool. If I open up one of these reports here, you can see here's a report that did a comparison for 12,000 records. There were some errors. It errored out at 200. And if I jump over here and say, let's look at the first 20, I can see all the data from source to target, scroll down, and then move along and see where the actual error occurred. And here there was a mismatch between formatting, which I left in for today, so you could see when an error is found, it'll tell you the source and target and pinpoint the actual error. So you can customize these reports as well as you set them up, and it'll tell you the differences, what's in the source, what's in the target, and invalid as well. And to tie it all together, we also do our risk-based reporting. So if I come over here, you can see the same sections, but now we're reporting on the business risk being covered. And as I expand this, these are my business requirements for the different types of tests. We've linked them to test cases, and we've weighted them according to the business risk, and this is giving us a more meaningful report from a dashboard point of view. So if I jump over here onto profiling, these are all the tests I ran for my profiling. I've weighted the requirement, and it's basically telling me out of all these tests, 81% of the business risk is being covered by that last execution that ran. So we're leveraging the same functionality from Tosca and adding Tosca DI functionality onto it to do our data warehouse testing at a large scale. Now it's time to take some questions. I see we have quite a few already, and please continue to send them through. The first one is, I have data in Salesforce and I need to verify it was loaded correctly into Snowflake. Can I do a Snowflake to Salesforce comparison? So yes, the beauty of Tosca Data Integrity, it has the ability to scan the entire Salesforce site, either via UI or API, and create models for tests, which can then be gathered to do a comparison against another source, such as Snowflake. Next question is, can I drive the Tosca Data Integrity tests with data from my existing Teradata to feed Snowflake tests? Yes, that's a good idea. We can use the data from Teradata to create data sheets built into Tosca Data Integrity to drive the actual Snowflake tests by parameters. This is great for migration testing. We have these data sheets built into Tosca DI, but can also leverage Excel spreadsheets or import data from elsewhere into our test sheets so that you have all your data in one single location, and it makes the maintenance going forward a lot easier as well. Next question is, we have Snowflake roles are used for running SQL. How does Tosca DI handle this? So yes, the good thing is, because Snowflake has an ODBC driver, which we generally use for a connection to Snowflake, we can set up different roles within this ODBC driver connection. Tosca DI works out of the box with any Snowflake roles, and we can set up different parameters and connection types within Tosca DI. Next question, we are using an on-premise data warehouse and moving to Snowflake. We have terabytes of data. How long will it take to run the tests? What's the limit? So for this, we need a bit more information on the environment, things like network speed and the machine spec itself that would run the tests, but there's no limit to the volume of data. It would just take a bit longer to run. So we have in-memory caching execution engines built for this big data. So to give you an idea, we have a customer that's currently testing their Netezza to Snowflake migration, and one of the tests we set up was for over 5 million records of data with 232 columns. It took them about 55 minutes with their setup to do a full row by row comparison. Hopefully that gives you an idea of that. We receive data in XML by API. Can Tosca DI work with this? Yes, in the demo I showed a quick example of a JSON file, how we load that up, but we can also handle XML files. Basically, we load it up and normalize the data to be compared with other data sources. So even in one example, we had a customer that basically we set it up to loop through multiple XMLs, loading them into our caching database so we can compare it to another data source. And that's pretty important because we're speaking to more and more customers, and we see out there it's not structured. It's a lot of unstructured data and data in different formats like message data. So we can work with most of these out of the box, and if not, we can even create custom modules. Like we had a customer that had a bunch of data in HTML format. So we just provided a model that converted that HTML data into a SQLite database, and then we grab the data from there to do comparisons. And we can do that on the fly as well. You showed Power BI. What about Tableau? So yes, that's for BI reports. So Tableau comes up quite often these days. We can pull data from any BI report really, either by API if it's available, or we can automate the UI to, for example, export the data, navigate to the report and export it to a CSV, and then pull the data from that. We can grab it from the UI, but generally going by API or exporting the data is a lot more stable. Snowflake has a time travel feature we're interested in using. Is this supported? So yes, this is a cool question because this comes, I was hoping it would come up at some point. I've been using this feature myself and I really like it. With Tosca DI, we have the out-of-the-box reconciliation model you've seen, and we can use this to compare present and past data. So with Snowflake, when you want to look at data in the past, we can just set it up so that present is source and past is target, and do a comparison like that from that side. And we still get the same report, and it'll tell us exactly what's changed from current date to previous dates in the past. So I can see there's still a lot more questions we didn't get through, but we're going to go through all of them offline and we'll get back to you by email from that side. But thanks a lot for joining us today and all the questions as well and your participation.